Hi, and welcome to this edition of Healing Moments with Martha. I am joining you this afternoon from St. Louis, Missouri, and today we get to interview and discuss with Gabrielle Thompson. Gabrielle Thompson is the CEO and Executive Director of Free for Life International, and their headquarters are located in Nashville, Tennessee, and she joins us today from her office there in Nashville. Thank you, Gabrielle. We are just delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for giving your time today.
Thank you, Martha. I am equally as delighted to be here with you.
Well, you were just a sweetheart. I just want to tell everybody how I got to know of this beautiful young lady. Her mom, Mary Thompson Johns, is actually one of my very best and dearest friends. And so I've had fun watching Gabrielle grow her career over the last several years. But this particular career that she's in now is of great and deep interest to me. And I felt like it was a necessary subject that we talk about today. But before we dive into what she does, I want her to tell us a little bit of her backstory and who Gabrielle Thompson is. So
Great.
take it away.
So a little bit about my background. Now I work in the space of anti-human trafficking, but really from the time I was about 12 years old, I knew that I wanted to work internationally serving women and children. And growing up, I really didn't know what that looked like. In my experience as a child, the only people that I had met that do any type of service internationally were missionaries. But I knew that I wanted to do community initiatives that would actually change generations and change trajectories of people's futures. So prior to my work in human trafficking, which really I believe is really the pinnacle of atrocities in our world right now, because it combines so many different points of suffering. When you look at poverty, when you look at illiteracy, when you look at, prior sexual abuse, it combines all of it. And so through a series of incredible and blessed events, I was able to transition to the space of being able to really serve those that have been trafficked. And it's been really, it's changed my life in the last 6 years that I've been able to be a part of Free for Life International and the work that we've been able to do around the globe.
That is incredible. You remind me of my oldest daughter, Mary, who had that same idea when she was 12 and knew early on that, quote, she was going to be doing international work. And I love how God just laid that on your heart and you just didn't, you didn't buy from that. Did you go to college there in Nashville or Franklin, or did you major in something in particular that helped your direction with this in particular or not?
Yes, actually. So from the time, because I already had such a focused direction I went to Middle Tennessee State University, and I was able to focus everything in my undergraduate towards any type of gendered international issues, which was great. So I have my degree in global studies and anthropology. And then for my master's, I have a master's in international development focused in women and gender. So really was able to, everything that I studied and focused on, all the research that I did throughout that time was all focused towards what is happening with women and children on an international scale, and what can be done about shifting their levels of suffering.
So you came on board 6 years ago with Free for Life International? Okay.
Yeah.
So at that point, when you came on board with Free for Life International, I know it was already established as a nonprofit. Isn't that correct? That's what I've understood. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so how long had it been up and running as a nonprofit before you came on board?
So we are about to celebrate our 15-year anniversary, actually. So we have been an organization since 2006. And I came on board and was able to actually, I succeeded the founder who was, had been running the organization for a very long time. And it was amazing because she laid this beautiful foundation. And what's been fantastic really in my tenure in the organization is that we've been able to grow from working in one country to now we work in 6 different countries. We had one program, now we have 5 programs that we heavily focus on. So really it was an amazing kind of, landing space to be able to grow. But now we are really just taking different leaps and bounds as an organization and making more impact than ever before.
I remember seeing some of those wonderful leaps and bounds on Facebook as you shared this incredible journey and all some of the doors that God had opened up for you. Share with us, if you don't, I know this is not in my questions, but share with us some of those doors that opened and how that came about as
Hmm.
yes, you have journeyed with Free for Life.
Well, it's been really amazing because I see how the Lord used every experience and piece of knowledge and training in my life to prepare me for being the leader of Free for Life International. And so, really, the development of I was able to develop all four of those additional programs that we have now since when I came into the organization. And really, what I look for when I want to develop a program is what is a gap in the anti trafficking community and where is the largest need in the world for us to focus our efforts, because what I want Free for Life International to be about is to be about filling those gaps and serving those that really oftentimes are forgotten or are the most in need. And so, all that to say, that is really, I've used those pieces to be able to develop those other programs. So, for example, just to mention some of the programs that we've developed and maybe like a little story about some of them. An example of that would be in Thailand. Thailand is one of the worst countries in the globe for human trafficking. And that is partially because they, for many, many years and still happening today, had a huge issue with trafficking of children. And so for a long time, it was actually very public. You could go into the red light district, purchase a child that you want to have sex with, and you could, as you know, if we went to visit, we could see that happening, a Caucasian man holding hands with a 6-year-old. So they have, but a part of that too is that Thailand has a huge multi-generational trafficking issue. And that, again, as I mentioned earlier in this interview, that the changing generations is so incredibly important to me. So basically recognizing, for example, those needs, we decided to support a home in Thailand that houses both minors and adults for long-term care. So the longest resident that has been in that program has been there since she was 10 years old, and now she is 22. So that
Wow.
just is an example of, what we're going to get into later, of the amount of time that healing is necessary for someone that comes out of trafficking, but also just really describing, kind of focusing on a need and expanding that to a program. Another brief example of that, Martha, because you kind of got me on my high horse here, and this is what I love to talk about, is I recognize, this was one particular summer that I was gone for a long time, visiting different orphanages and safe homes around the world that serve human trafficking victims. And what I recognize is that a lot of the orphans that I was visiting that were about to age out had no support system, had no income, and were
Right.
absolute targets of a trafficker picking them up. And those at the safe homes, some of them were orphaned or neglected and ended up being trafficked. And so I thought, where is the curriculum that is preventing these precious children from falling into the hands of traffickers? So long story short, then I developed our prevention curriculum based on that need because it didn't exist. So
Wow.
that just gives an example of how we've made those leaps and bounds in the last 6 years.
Yeah. Wow. And as you were sharing with that, I am just amazed at the domino effect because we see now clearly that what you just described, it's not just a matter of, quote, going and rescuing these women or these children and we're done. But because I worked with prison ministry for a while, so I get that whole mentality, the need of learning and being in a safe house uh, to help them establish themselves again
Mm.
and to unlearn what they've been taught for so long. So it's not just a matter of, oh, we rescued 700 girls and we're done. And you're doing it and doing it well. And I mean, that in itself is a huge feat. So let me ask you this. Would you go in? So you go in and you rescue the girls. What does that look like for what does that look like? Can you describe that to me? What
I
that might
actually
look like?
love that you brought this up, Martha, because this is something I'm really passionate about. And I just want to bring some education to your listeners right now, because you said something that was meaningful to me a moment ago, which is that you know, it's not about the numbers, not verbatim what you said. It's not about the numbers, but what is happening post rescue.
Yeah. Right.
And just, I want to mention that to people because making sure that if your viewers, for example, are passionate about anti-trafficking and they want to partner with an anti-trafficking organization, I recommend you look into their ethical practices, because rescue can be done in an unethical way, which is actually re-traumatizing to the victim themselves. Or rescue can be done in a highly ethical way that is done with trauma caregiving involved in it, and actually provides the space to the survivor to be able to make those appropriate next steps. So within that context, for me and for my organization, what is of utmost priority is being survivor focused and having that trauma confident care and having an ethical practice of rescue. So the way that we do rescue is very unique, in the sense that we do an approach that is really not done here in the United States. It's called transit monitoring. And basically we have what we call a border monitoring station set up on the open border between Nepal and India, meaning that people can just pass back and forth without ever being identified, ever showing paperwork, etc. Well, that's a great place for traffickers to transport their victims to another country where they don't speak the same language, etc. So we have trained border monitoring staff that
Because they're
actually,
not going to be suspected or asked questions or anything,
right,
correct? If I'm
there's
understanding that correctly? Okay.
protections. And it's challenging for us to understand in the United States, because we have nothing of the sort here in this country. You know, you want to cross a border, there's a whole process to do that. But there, because it's open, there is no process, there is no monitoring whatsoever. So our staff basically can identify certain red flags of someone being trafficked across the border. We then have the authority to stop traffic, stop buses, tut-tuts, people walking. Because of that lack of authority, they're given authority, like, for example, a police officer. Well, from that, then we intercept the situation. We are able to, for example, pull people off of buses, interview them, determine if they're being trafficked, and then we're able to either, if they're traveling with a trafficker, we're able to gather that information, contact the local police. If they themselves are being trafficked or on their way to being trafficked, we can intercept that situation in a very peaceful way. And then, of course, we take the next steps as far as whether that be a temporary safe home or repatriation. And through that program, it's really our cornerstone program. We have rescued over 1,400 women and girls.
Okay. Awesome. I was just going to say, wow, um, I'm just amazed at all the steps that are involved. Because you have this concept of just, sweeping in, rescue the girl and taking her off, or, getting her out of that, or, the children out. And I just am amazed. I'm thinking about, how many people does it take to make that happen? How many people do you need that are trained? And what is the background of their training, if that makes any sense, to help make that peaceful transition in a rescue?
Well, and I will say we at times do engage in the traditional form of rescue that people are very familiar with, like a raid or a bust or a sting. We do that as well, but it's on a case-by-case basis. And part of that is that we must have a tip from an actual victim, him or herself.
Okay.
So that it's an actual reliable source to move forward. Now, with border monitoring, we're at one piece of a border that is over 1,000 miles. And so luckily there's other border monitoring stations set up on this border, but we personally have 13 staff. And it's, we go through a training process of helping them understand what does it look like when someone is being trafficked across the border, what are the red flags, how do you identify that? And some of that is even working with people that have already been intercepted and offering some of that wisdom to them, because we do believe the survivor, him or herself, is the expert more than any of us can be, no matter how long we've worked in this space.
Because they're coming from the inside and they can tell you what it's like.
Yes.
Correct. That would totally make sense to me. I would think that, when you rescue a young lady and then you've done that, and the peaceful approach that you'll have, the successful peaceful approach, then you take her to a safe house. And what does that look like? And what is the normal process or procedure on the safe house?
Well, Martha, you're opening up a can of worms, because I will mention that culturally speaking, every country is different based on their approaches because, for example, at our Safe Home in Thailand, they actually prefer group therapy over individualized therapy, whereas here, individualized therapy in the United States is actually very successful for survivors of trafficking. And so every organization has, a different protocol, and it, for us, our protocol varies based on which country we're serving in. So in India and Nepal, for example, if we are encountering someone that actually has been trafficked, not someone on their way to be trafficked, we send them to our temporary safe home. And then at that point, we'll identify whether they need to go into a long-term placement of a home, or if their family was not involved in their trafficking, oftentimes we will help repatriate them with their family members, which is really the ideal approach. In those situations, unfortunately, family members are involved very often with a trafficking situation. So it's often not safe for us to actually repatriate individuals with their families.
So did I understand you to say that a lot of times the family is involved in the trafficking? Is that
Yes,
correct? Okay,
it's not uncommon.
not uncommon. I cannot imagine that. Is that a part of their religious belief, cultural beliefs, or both? Or things? I mean, does that make sense? What I just asked. Where do they
Well,
think that that's okay? Why do we think that it's okay to traffic another human? I mean, I don't.
and I will say, so trafficking in the US looks different than trafficking internationally, which I would love to dive into a little bit more with you. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess I'll lay this foundation first. So I want to go ahead and break the misconception for those of you that are listening to this, that trafficking is absolutely not done through kidnapping. Less than 10% of trafficking cases are kidnapping. And I'm talking about on a global scale. The vast majority of trafficking, and I mean how it happens, is through a luring process. That luring process is based on an individual's vulnerability. Internationally, the primary vulnerability that lures people into trafficking is going to be poverty and lack of ability to support someone's basic needs. In the United States, the primary vulnerability is going to be an emotional vulnerability. So, for example, in the United States, we see a lot of trafficking survivors. They come from broken homes, they come from families that may have had drug addicted parents, but we also see girls and women that came from very, upper middle class families, two parent households, but they didn't feel like they were receiving enough love, or they didn't feel good about themselves, or didn't feel confident. And it's just about someone coming in, identifying that vulnerability, twisting it. And then that's how the luring process starts.
Right. Right. Okay.
Internationally, it's almost, a lot of it, yes, is intentional. And we've actually arrested, which I'd love to share with you a story of how we were able to arrest and prosecute a trafficker for 40 years that was actually trafficking her daughter, her sister, and her niece. But that situation, yes, does happen where it's very intentional. Yes, I'm selling this person to make money, but oftentimes we see it in situations where the parents were tricked and deceived, and they think their daughter is going to work at a factory in another city and going to send back money. And so they're like, yeah, take her. That's great. And that still, for us, includes parents being a part of it because they
Gotcha.
made
Okay.
the agreement to.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that. And I appreciate the difference between letting our audience know the difference between what it looks like here and what it looks like internationally. Um, I just, yeah, the vulnerability and the self-confidence and the broken homes and all of that, I can totally understand how that would happen with anyone, actually. Would you say that most of the people that you rescue, or is your rescue primarily focused on women, or is it both girls and boys that are trafficked?
So traditionally and really historically within our organization, it's been 100% women and girls. However, it's been my heart for a long time to expand to the male space. However, there is a lack of resources on a global level, and definitely here in the United States, with resources for men and boys, but also a challenge with men and boys actually being able to say, I'm a victim of trafficking. There's a lot of shame there, a different type of shame than women. that we serve in this capacity, but I was excited to share with you on this podcast, Martha, that we actually, we are expanding our efforts in India. And a part of that is we are actually not just doing our transit monitoring at that border space, we're actually expanding it to Delhi, a city, and looking at train stations for monitoring trafficking of children being dropped off at the train station to be trafficked. Well, the majority of the individuals that we're intercepting are male minors.
Wow.
And I want to share a story with you of a rescue that happened last week. So basically, one of the male minors that we were able to intercept at the train station, he was on his way to be trafficked. You know, traffickers put him on the train, they sent him to Delhi. At Delhi, you know, he was supposed to be picked up to go to be labor trafficked, but we were able to intercept that situation because he was a little boy wandering. So he gave us information of where he was going to work. Well, basically, we involved another partner organization in India that does primarily rescue, and they go to this location, which is actually a carpet shop. And when they arrived at the carpet shop, there was a man that was sitting in a chair with a carpet underneath him, and the authorities asked him to move, and underneath the carpet was a trap door, and inside of the trap door, pitch darkness, were a dozen little boys that were being enslaved for his labor and living in this small trap door.
Wow.
They were just dropped down food, but they were living in pitch darkness. And so our organization, in partnership with the other organizations local to India, were able to pull all of those little boys out. So we, for the first time, are expanding our efforts to focus, to not focus, but to expand into working
And
with boys.
gotcha. Yeah.
But our other programs, are open to boys and men. We just never have applicants.
Yeah.
We never have requests. They don't come forward for those other programs as much. So it's just challenging.
Wow. Wow. It's a lot of information, Gabrielle. I mean, it
Sorry,
really is.
I
It's so
overwhelmed
different from,
you.
yeah, I think what you're describing is different from what we have been told here in the States or what we have pictured uh, based on what we've read. And I appreciate you clarifying so many things. Um, so as far as like um, here in the States, uh, let's talk about two markets here, the States and international, which we have here in Thailand. It's a training for like a group that wanted to learn more about the red flags and how to recognize it. Does that look different for if you're training a group here in the States versus what you would see in Thailand or India? Does it look different? Does that make sense?
It does look different. And by the way, we do provide a red flags training because that is one of our, core programs is all of our educational work for the community. So we provide free red flags trainings to churches, teams, individuals, et cetera. If they want to host, an awareness night at their home, for example. I mean, COVID has kind of changed things for us, but yes, the red flags do look significantly different. And I would love to share some of the red flags of, for your listeners to kind of hear what to look for here in the US, because I really want to emphasize if this is something for your listeners that is hurting you, that hurts your heart to hear about trafficking, knowing that you can be a concerned citizen and actually engage. And that big piece of engagement is one, really reliable information coming from the experts, AKA anti-trafficking organizations, but two, being a concerned citizen is being able to recognize when there are red flags of someone being trafficked and knowing the next steps of what to do in those situations.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's awesome. If are y'all, I know with the COVID has changed everything, unfortunately, but are y'all able to do that type of training right now, or is it by way of Zoom, or are y'all going, and how is that happening right now? If
It's by
someone wants
way
to reach
of
out,
Zoom.
huh?
It's by way of Zoom. So we're
That's all
actually
I figured. Okay.
everywhere now since we don't have to travel to do that. So yes, I mean, anyone listening that's interested, feel free to go to our website, and we have a requested training button there. So we would love to assist.
Awesome. I would love that. I appreciate that. I cannot say how excited I am to be able to talk to you still. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but just learning and having the right education, being educated. I can remember even when my son was went through recovery, and what I had learned about addictions was not correct at all. And I think we have to be willing to unlearn things and what we think. And when we are fighting against such causes as this, and to be willing to unlearn what we think is correct. And education, or correct education, correct information is really important. Um, when you do a rescue there, like in Thailand, and you've got the girls there in the safe house, it, what would be some of the hindrances to them being there successfully? Do their families get involved at all, or do they try to intervene in any way that would be negative to her being uh, learning, about trafficking, and and the counseling that would be needed to help somebody re-enter society, as I would say it?
At the time in which someone is trafficked and actually has been trafficked for a period of time, typically they have no communication with the outside world. This is in the United States and internationally. Traffickers are really, they restrict communication. And so family members are, not a part of the process whatsoever unless they are the traffickers themselves.
Okay.
Um, Obviously, once someone is rescued, we like to, reunite those individuals with their families. But sometimes, for the girls, and, you mentioned Thailand, it's not safe for them because a lot of times I'm thinking of some of the women that we serve in our home right now. They grew up in rural villages in Thailand, and their mother started, you know, allowing men to come and pay and have sex with them when they were children. And then as they grew up, they ended up going to the red light districts. And so they, really the mother is not a safe person because she was the one
Right.
that's selling her
Right.
child.
Yeah.
So a lot of times that's why we like to have a family style home, because we like to become family. So that is long-term relationships. That's what it's all about for us.
Absolutely. And I
Mm.
love that. And you're right. That is what it takes. As I've learned, uh, that is most admirable, what you're doing. And I think that's what the gospel, and that's really what love and family really looks like, is creating that safe space where people can heal from the trauma they've been through. And that's what you're doing. It's so beautiful, life giving, life changing. I know it must excite you to see these young ladies rediscover themselves, and to be able to go out and not be caught up in the red light district again. Uh, uh, how many women, I know you rescued 700, how many women have gone through the Safe House program and, quote, graduated? Or is that what do you call that? Or just re-enter society? How many did you say?
Well, that's a challenging one to say because we actually, this is our second safe home. So in our first safe home, which was in Nepal, and then this one, it's very different than each other. And with the home in Thailand, we prefer, not don't like, we prefer that the women are able to get some type of higher education prior to leaving. So that way their
Yeah.
risk of being trafficked is removed. So we have had
Right.
14 women finish higher education degrees, whether
Awesome.
that be higher level vocational or higher level, some type of, we've had master's degree. Some women have gone forward and gotten a master's degree in Thailand. So that's 14, but we've had several others cycle through the home, but not go through the educational portion
Part.
of that.
Yeah.
Especially with the minors, because the state technically is, I mean, they still have legal rights if a child has been abandoned or orphaned. Sometimes the state itself will move the children. So,
Yeah.
but I also want to mention, our programs here in the United States that we provide. We have a scholarship program that is open to any survivor in the entire United States. And we are supporting 21 women right now for in the scholarship program to pursue their higher education or vocational dreams. And that is such a beautiful thing because, you know, when a survivor can get to the place where they're able to really pursue what they're excited about,
Yeah.
it's everything to me.
That that that's the icing on the cake. I would say that I know how I feel when I see people succeed at what they are passionate about. It's so life giving and it's so fun to watch. And so the safe house, how many women can y'all house at one time there in the safe house there? Is it whole 15, 20 or what?
18.
18. Okay.
Yes.
What is the average cost? I'm not sure you know. What does it cost for those women to stay there in the house, if you don't mind me asking? I'm doing it so that the people listening know how much it costs to run this beautiful nonprofit. So that's what I'm asking.
And I will say it's expensive, but it's more expensive in the United States, which is why we don't have a safe home here. So for each person, for just basic needs, it's $500 a month to cover their basic needs. If they go to school, because tuition, we have to pay tuition as well. It's about $1,000 a month, sometimes $1,500 if they had to go to, you know, a specialized school.
Per person. Okay.
Per month, per person per month. In the United States, to give kind of an idea also to your viewers, in the US, it's typically about $30,000 a year to support one woman in a home for a year. So it's very expensive. The rehabilitation process is very expensive, which is why I emphasize things like prevention, because we as a world and all of the anti-trafficking organizations combined, there are not enough resources to serve everyone. So that's why prevention is so important. But, you know, the rehabilitation work is crucial.
Yeah. I don't know, but I'm just thinking of Thistle Farms there in Nashville. I'm sure you're familiar. And I was involved with them a little bit and got to know about the safe houses and what. When I ask you questions, I'm thinking about that. It's amazing it costs so much more here in the States because I know it's expensive to get education for people, whether it be community college or whatever. I can't imagine. I mean, it can be expensive. So do you have an agreement with the local schools that they offer these discounted courses, or are they just is it the normal procedure? Does that make sense? Here in Thailand, is there scholarships for them, or do they work with y'all?
No discounts anywhere for survivors at this point. However, here in the United States, there are some universities that are moving towards potential full ride scholarships for survivors of human trafficking as the conversation and dialogue about trafficking has become more present and more kind of in the front facing media. But no, so all of the scholarships and education that we fund for survivors is, you know, the normal cost of any type of education. So
Gotcha.
it is challenging, you know, it's expensive, but it's so important.
Yeah. Well, compared to the cost, I mean, you're talking about a human life. So their expenses incurred are, I mean, are small compared to the preciousness of the life. But I am astounded to hear the whole story of the backstory of what y'all do, and my heart is even more encouraged just to hear the stories of success of the women and the staff there. So on staff, how many on staff do y'all have there in Nashville?
There's 9 total on staff in Nashville. And then I support 15 team members internationally. So, and that it's just the border monitoring staff and then 2 of the house mothers in Thailand. So, but really here in the US, this is what I call our mothership. I mean, everything operates out of the Nashville office. So this is really our hub is here in Nashville.
Do y'all offer opportunities for people to go, like if I wanted to go to Thailand and visit and see the work, do y'all offer those opportunities for people to go and do that or not?
We don't do that very often, just because it's very, you know, unlike other organizations that let's say are doing, you know, literacy work or are wanting to build schools, we're working with such a really a specialized population. And so for us, bringing groups to visit things like safe houses are really, um, can be very damaging to survivors. So
Okay.
I don't lead donor groups for programs working with survivors. I lead donor groups when I'm going to do prevention curriculum work in Latin America. So
Okay.
that's the challenges, my first priority is the women themselves, and are they
Yeah,
comfortable with
absolutely. Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like
I was just thinking about myself, how I could learn more and be involved. And that's what I was probably should have asked. I do what I did.
talk more about that, Martha, too.
So, I mean, because there's nothing like seeing things firsthand. But I get the trauma thing. I mean, even when people are in recovery here in the States, there's a certain amount of time where there's no communication with the outside world, right?
Mhm.
So, or because of having to relearn things and to adjust. Wow. I am, my heart is encouraged and challenged greatly today by hearing all the beautiful work that Free for Life International is doing. Bravo for all of your concerted efforts, Gabrielle. I mean, I'm just excited and amazed at how God just prepared you every step of the way. And it's just a beautiful thing to hear. For people who would like to dive into a deeper conversation with you about being a donor or a scholarship, helping sponsor a scholarship or whatever, how can they reach you guys here at Free for Life? What is the best way?
Great. Thank you for asking, Martha. So we are everywhere. We are online. Our website is freeforlifeintl.org.
Okay.
And we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. You can find us at Free for Life, and that's FOR, not the number four. Free
Okay.
for Life INTL is our handle.
Okay.
And if you go to our website and just press contact us or send us a message over Facebook or Instagram, we will definitely, get back to you. We again offer trainings. We're always looking for people that want to invest and walk alongside us in this work, and really continue to spread the word, because we need more people that can share appropriate information about trafficking and really make this truly a global effort to stop this modern day slavery from happening all around us.
Uh, as we get ready to close, I wanted to ask you this. Statistically, can you throw out some statistics for trafficking in like in Thailand and India? Like how many people, how many children are trafficked each year? Do you have a number for that?
Well, I think I'll do the global statistics. So
Okay. All right,
really,
that's fine.
the estimates of people being trafficked are 40 million people around the world. There is no country on earth that does not have trafficking. There is
Yeah,
no
yeah,
state in this country that does not have cases of
trafficking.
trafficking.
Yeah, yeah.
Here in the United States, the average age of someone being trafficked is 13 to 15 years old. And trafficking does primarily focus itself on, when it comes to sex trafficking, on women and girls. But then I mean, we have a huge problem with forced labor as a form of trafficking in this world as well, which is
So
primarily
it's both.
men.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not just
So,
one. Yeah, yeah. Forced labor. Yeah.
yes.
So forced labor. I think that uh, 40 million lives. Wow, that is incredible.
But
Incredible.
don't get discouraged, because
And
it's important to remember that yes, there are 40 million, and a part of it too is because there's 7 different types of human trafficking, not just the one type that we all hear about, which is sex trafficking. And also that, when people get overwhelmed by the 40 million, but remembering that even changing one person's life is so meaningful
yeah,
and so important. And just to remember the little things count in the
right,
story of trafficking and
right,
in the eradication of trafficking.
right, exactly. And I appreciate you reminding us as an audience because it's like, somebody said the other day, maybe I can't save the whole forest, but I can save my neighbor. I can make a difference in my little uh, portion right here in my own neighborhood by being properly educated by people like you and helping people get the correct information, and that is a lot of the battle, is having the proper information and education and what that looks like. Thank you, Gabrielle. You are an amazing young lady. I'm so delighted that you were able to share with me today on this hard subject of human trafficking and what that looks like internationally. Bravo again for your efforts there, and I will be sharing the links to your organization so that people can reach out to you, hopefully help you guys financially as people feel led to make a difference. That's always an option, and one of the biggest ways I would think they can help you guys in your work and continue to see people's lives change. And so thank you so much. And thank you to my listening audience, and thank you to Duke Legal Services, one of my sponsors. And I appreciate y'all's time today and for listening in for this edition of Healing Moments with Martha. I do have a second podcast this week. I'll be interviewing Amanda Anderson on Friday and sharing that link with you guys. But again, this will be on YouTube and on Facebook and on Instagram. And feel free to reach out to Gabrielle for more information of how we can join her in this all too important fight of sex trafficking and human trafficking and changing one life at a time. Thank you again.